Paul LeBlanc, president of Southern New Hampshire University, said in February of 2016, there has been a proliferation of certificates and certifications of various kinds. There's almost a bewildering array of these microcredentials available to students. Educators have been driven to make them available, meaningful, and workplace relevant. We will see continued interest in microcredentials in 2016, and part of the focus will be to bring some sort of rational order to this wild landscape. The Lumina Foundation and others have various credentialing framework projects underway to this end. As we begin to think about the value of a badge or microcredential, it's important to review some of the reasons behind the movement. We'll take a rather quick look at some of the drivers behind microcredentialing, considerations of motivation of learners, and we'll take a look at a framework for badging. Note that badge and microcredential will be used interchangeably in this presentation. Keep this in mind when we move on to our next objectives presentation. LeBlanc further noted, there is a long-time recognition that learners, particularly adult learners, often need education that isn't the full-time degree program. It's a form of just-in-time learning that is commensurate with our recognition that we now live in a world where people will change their jobs frequently and the pace of change is very quick. Say I work in IT and I'm an expert at X, Y, and Z. All of a sudden, a new technology emerges, and I need to learn about it, but I don't need 12 courses for a master's degree. I need a 3-course certificate at the undergraduate level in this new technology so that I can stay current and progress in my career. Schools see microcredential programs as easy money makers. The institution doesn't have to sell a prospective student on a full-blown degree program and the respective cost. Instead, they sell them on a more affordable certificate or a credential. For many institutions, these programs have become good revenue streams. We're starting to adopt a broader sense of a continuum of learning. As we approach a time when we're living into our 10th decade, why would we think we only should spend 4 years of our lives on intense learning? Learning is something that should happen periodically throughout life, and you can't just keep plugging 2- and 4-year degrees to meet these lifelong learning needs. Other trends in education are also fueling the microcredentialing badging movement. There is a push from many stakeholders, including the federal government, which is requiring career-based and for-profit institutions to demonstrate that what a student spends on a degree has potential to earn enough to at least pay back student loans, etc. Gainful employment. This is directly related to the value of the degree, perceived and literal, especially after the publishing of Academically Adrift, Arum and Ruska, 2011. That is, do students finish school with a true gain demonstrable in knowledge? How do we know? The how do we know question is then directly related to demonstrating competencies, thus a movement towards CBE, competency-based education. We are seeing new types of assessment, direct assessment, and these alternative approaches are being approved by accreditors and the Department of Education. They are changing the face of transcripts too, from grades and GPAs to listings of competencies. External drivers for badging models also seek to address some critical challenges. Everhart et al., 2016, page 3. These challenges emanate, in this case, from 3 stakeholders. The students, who need to be able to understand and compare credentials to other institutions, and then to understand the value, as we just discussed, gainful employment. the educational institutions themselves, who need to be able to determine the credential's worth in external markets and perhaps in comparison to other institutions. And finally, to employers, who often do not understand competencies or skills and knowledge that come with credentials earned. In addition to the importance of stakeholders understanding competencies that come with certain credentials, there is a need for more connected and transparent practices. Everhart et al., page 3. We will only touch briefly on the topic of learner motivation, as there is, obviously, a great deal of information on this topic, but it is important to recognize how motivation plays a critical factor in badging and how learners might value or not the badge itself and or the process of earning a badge. In terms of aligning badging with learning, Gamrat et al. 2014 offer a couple of suggestions. It is not only important to incentivize learning, but it is necessary to connect learning with validated activities and achievement of outcomes tied to activities. And that customization is an important motivational factor which ties to learner empowerment. Darling Hammond et al. 2014 also note the importance of accountability in any learning framework. As we think about badging, a critical element is that the badge allows for demonstration of evidence of learning and that the badge has value. So what can a badge do? A badge can carry many opportunities. According to Schenke, Tran, and Hickey 2013, they can provide privileges. If the privilege granted for earning a badge is not associated with something the learner values, he or she is unlikely to engage or persist in the activity associated with earning that badge. In other words, badging should lead to something beyond the badge itself. Recognize identities. Badges can recognize a learner's role within the badging system, such as recognizing their specialization in journalism, engineering, or peer mentoring. Promote and recognize engagement with communities. Engagement in the community can be seen to promote learners' motivation to continue on activities because learners are relating to others. Display badges to the public. Public display can have a positive or negative effect, depending on the learner. Sometimes public display can incite competition, and for some people, this is a good thing. For others, it may create a negative reaction. Recognize different outcomes. The type of learning that a badge recognizes and the way that recognition is managed has profound implications for motivation. Some badges are awarded for meeting some criterion, performance-based, while other badges are awarded for engaging in some activity, effort-based. It seems likely that recognition of social learning will operate very differently in effort-based versus performance-based contexts. It is important to determine types of outcomes and how those achievements are displayed. Utilize different means of assessment. The type of assessment has significant consequences for motivation. For example, having an expert versus a computer conducting the assessment communicates different expectations to the learner. Knowing that your peers are assessing you is very different than knowing a computer is assessing you. It may be worth noting that the direct language from this framework is not necessarily geared towards educators. Marketing, for instance, may not resonate with faculty. However, the intent behind the framework can easily be translated to an academic setting. That is, if we subscribe to this framework, one that applies recognition of competencies through validating evidence of learning, then this approach to badging makes sense. A successful badging program could incorporate demonstration of each of the framework items to help ensure usefulness to individuals, across many degrees or certifications, and perhaps across multiple institutions. Looking at the framework components in more detail, experience. We can translate this as a class or a seminar, where the learner has opportunities to experience the subject matter. Validate. We can look at this as the assessment and, ultimately, as demonstration and validation of learning. Assemble. We can look at this as the building of knowledge through artifacts, like in a portfolio, or simply the culmination of evidence of learning towards a certification or even full degree. Think of it as the curriculum of a program. Promote. This is the badge, microcredential, the certificate, or even the degree. Badges can follow the learner, just like a degree or diploma can. In many cases, though, a digital badge can be uploaded to emails, LinkedIn, and portfolios, allowing for easy identification of competencies. We'll talk about tagging in the next presentation. Finally, badges should be aligned with continuous improvement loops. What learning opportunities can come next for a learner? Also, how can institutions use outcomes assessment to further refine their own programs? In summary, we see that several factors contribute to the rise of badging. There are pressures from stakeholders, which include the learners themselves. We need to consider learner motivation when we think about implementing badging. And we know the badging has enormous potential. We are just beginning to see the broad extent to which they can serve education, business, and beyond. As we think about a badging system, a framework can be very helpful. We reviewed a framework from the Titan partners, which include these 5 elements: experience, validate, assemble, promote, and align.